Hey guys, welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. Before we jump into the content, I just want to take a moment to say thank you all so much for all of your kind words, your comments, your thoughts, and your prayers, and emails even, that y'all sent my way during that brief and unprecedented hospital stay just a little over a week ago. It really meant a whole lot, and I really appreciate it. Certainly something that you don't want to have happen during a global pandemic, but I'm doing much better now, and I'm certainly ready to get back to the gridiron, a place I don't plan on leaving anytime soon. So once again, guys, thank you so much for all of that support, all of those kind words. It really did mean a lot. But now we're going to get back to football talk, and today we've got a handful of coaches whose seats are a little toasty going into 2020, and we're going to try to figure out how they can cool off.
Yeah.
A few weeks ago, a list was released of 9 head coaches that were on the hot seat going into 2020. Today, we're taking a look at 6 of them. And of course, remember that this list of coaches up here is in no particular order, but we are going to begin with the guy who many have at the top of their hot seat lists, and that, of course, is Clay Helton at USC. And when you look at head coaches that are maybe on the hot seat, maybe not, it's difficult because some schools have higher expectations than others. Clay Helton, being 40-22 at many other schools, would be very acceptable. But by USC standards, that is not acceptable, and I'll explain why. Clay Helton coached 10 games as an interim head coach before he was finally given the official head coaching title of the Trojans. He went 5-4 as an interim at USC in 2015. Then that interim tag was removed, and he was given the entire head coaching position in 2016. From 2016 to 2017, Helton went 21-6. Of course, the Trojans were led by a dominant wide receiver core and a great quarterback, and Sam Darnold. But in 4 full seasons as head coach with that interim tag removed, Helton is just 34-18, meaning that he is just 13-12 from 2018 and 2019. That's not acceptable by USC standards. 5-7 in 2018, 8-5 in 2019. That's not competing at elite levels in the Pac-12. That's not competing at an elite level nationally. So 2020 seems to be a major make or break year for USC. They have the talent there. Keaton Slovis, a fantastic quarterback, another great wide receiver core, and a defense that should be improving just a little bit. Maybe this team could be reminiscent of that 2016 or 2017 squad that Helton took over with. But when you look at USC's schedule, they draw Alabama and Notre Dame in the non-conference. They have to go to Oregon, Utah, and Stanford. The schedule doesn't do them any favors here. So will 8 wins be enough? Once again, 8 wins is not contending for a spot in the college football playoff. 8 wins may be enough, depending on how the conference shakes out, to slip into the Pac-12 championship. Maybe you can get into the Rose Bowl if you win it all. But is 8 wins going to be enough for Clay Helton in 2020 to keep his job for another year? With all this speculation and for all this talk that's been going on for years, I'm going to say it's not. Moving down, we have another major California school. It's UCLA, the rival of USC, and Chip Kelly is the head man there. You know, when he took this job at UCLA, I think Bruin fans and fans across college football were very excited. Because if you remember how well Chip Kelly did at Oregon, you thought if he can do that at UCLA, he's going to make UCLA a power again, and they're going to be very fun to watch. So far, that has not happened. Chip Kelly, in just 2 years at UCLA, is 7-17 overall. In 4 years at Oregon, before he left for the NFL, he was 46-7. In 2 years at UCLA, he has lost more games than he did in 4 years at Oregon. And really, Chip Kelly has never been the same since he left for the NFL. He had a good season, maybe 2 with the Philadelphia Eagles, then after that, he just tanked. He's practically become irrelevant. UCLA started 0-5 in 2018, including losses to Fresno State and Cincinnati. They started 1-5 in 2019, including another loss to Cincinnati and San Diego State. They won 3 straight games over Stanford, Arizona State, and Colorado, and had that 32-point comeback win against Washington State, which led many to believe that UCLA was finally turning a corner. Then they lost their final 3 games by a combined score of 129-56. UCLA is not trending in the right direction. Year 3, we always say new coaches need about 3 or 4 years to maybe get their team and players in place. He's entering year 3 in 2020, and UCLA has to get way more competitive and might need to get to a bowl game just to get his name off of this list. He's not the same guy we used to see many years ago when he was head coach of the Ducks. And then rounding out this Pac-12 trio, we have Kevin Sumlin, who was just 9-15 in 2 years at Arizona, going 5-7 in his first year, and then taking a step back in his second year, going 4-8. And we know Kevin Sumlin, he's an offensive guru. He's an offensive mind. He did extremely well during his time at Houston, came over to Texas A&M, and contended in the SEC. A&M never really had bad years in the SEC, but there were many years that they started hot. Were number 6 in the country at one point, and people were talking about them making the playoff, and then they lost, 4 of their last 5 games, and would always finish somewhere around 8-4, 8-5, somewhere around there. Best year came in one of his first years, I believe in 2012, with Johnny Manziel. Kevin Sumlin messed up big time with Khalil Tate. Being an offensive mind like that, a guy that used to coach guys like Case Keenum and Johnny Manziel and guys like that, he messed up big because Khalil Tate had so much potential to fit into Kevin Sumlin's offense. And I know that Tate did battle injuries from time to time and was not nearly as good the previous few years as he was when he burst onto the college football scene, but still. Arizona started 4-1 in 2019. They lost 7 straight games after that, and their closest margin of defeat was just 10 points. They could very well start 3-0 in 2020. First 3 games are against Hawaii, Portland State, and Stanford, all at home. Arizona has to get bowling. If they do not make a bowl game this year, I do believe Kevin Sumlin's out. And then who will take him? He took that major leap to the SEC, did decent at A&M, but A&M was fed up with him. He would have failed in the SEC, would have failed in the Pac-12. What would be next in store for Kevin Sumlin? I don't know. Probably a step down to a group of 5 if you're asking me. But 9-15 in 2 years, unacceptable for Arizona. Got to get him to a bowl game in 2020 to get off this list. So moving down, we're out of the Pac-12. We're moving back east a little bit. We head to Nebraska. And many will say that Scott Frost doesn't deserve to be on the hot seat. Many will say Scott Frost should not have his name up here. Like Kevin Sumlin, he is 9-15 in 2 years at Nebraska. 4-8 season and a 5-7 season. Many, will look at that and say, Scott Frost, because he's, that Nebraska wonder boy, because he has the connections, that, yeah, he's entering year 3, but he's still got plenty of years left in Nebraska. And I don't think that's the case. I think it would be very difficult for Nebraska to have to fire him. They love him. They love Scott Frost. They don't want to fire him. And Nebraska is one of the most loyal fan bases and passionate fan bases in all of college football. They don't want to see one of their own come in and fail and have to get rid of him. But the fact of the matter is, you look at what he did in 2018. 4-8 season, horrible start, won 4 of their last 6 games, and 2 of those losses in that little 6-game stretch came by 8 combined points. 3 to Iowa, 5 to Ohio State. Not too bad. So you thought, okay, 2019, they're going to turn the corner. And there was a lot of hype surrounding Nebraska. Lots and lots of hype. They had Adrian Martinez as a Heisman contender. People had them winning the West. People thought maybe they were a playoff dark horse. They had them ranked at the beginning of the season after a 4-8 season. In 2019, they started 4-2 and then lost 5 of their last 6 games, including 3 by 1 possession. So 4-2, right there, you knew, okay, Nebraska's not back to being elite, but maybe they can just get to the postseason. Losing 5 of their last 6 games, including 3 by 1 possession. Nebraska didn't know how to finish. They have not been to a bowl game since 2016. They have not won a bowl game since 2015. Luckily for Scott Frost, they don't leave the state of Nebraska until October. Their first 4 games are all at home, including a conference game against Purdue. If they can start 4-0 in that stretch, the postseason will be very, very likely for Nebraska, and Scott Frost will buy himself a little more time. I'm a huge fan of his. What he did at UCF at Central Florida was not a fluke. It was legit. He's a good coach. You just got to give him time. Nebraska's given him 3 years now, going into his 3rd year. He's got to have a big one in 2020. 9-15 in 2 years, just not acceptable by Nebraska standards. All right, we move over to South Carolina in the SEC. Will Muschamp has been at South Carolina for 4 years. It really doesn't feel like it's been that long. And, you know, people will say, okay, South Carolina is a very difficult place to win. I mean, especially when you're in the SEC and you're competing against the likes, at least in your division, of Georgia, and Florida, and even Tennessee, who is a very big recruiting hotspot right now and is doing very well on the recruiting trail. Will Muschamp is 26-25 in those 4 years at South Carolina. His best season came in his 2nd year when he went 9-4, including that bowl win over Michigan. They are 4-8 in 2019. Went 4-8 in 2019. And of course, you can blame a lot of that on injuries, inexperience if you want. But they did have enough guys to go in there and upset Georgia in Athens, which is one of the reasons I think maybe he's still here in South Carolina right now. That was a huge, huge win, going on the road and beating a top 3 team in the entire country. But if you look at the history of South Carolina football, go and look at what Steve Spurrier did during his time there. From 2005 to 2015, Steve Spurrier coached at South Carolina and never had a losing season. And he did have 3 straight 11-win seasons. 3 straight 11-2 seasons at South Carolina. That was from 2011 to 2013. So the potential is there. You can't say you can't win in Columbia, because you can. Is Will Muschamp the guy that can do it? 26-25, barely 500, really doesn't cut it just about anywhere. Certainly doesn't cut it in the SEC. And unfortunately for South Carolina, when you look at their schedule, it's once again one of the toughest in the country. At Kentucky, at Florida, they draw Texas A&M out of the West, and then in a 4-week span have to face off against Georgia at home and then travel to LSU and Clemson, the 2 teams that met in the national championship last year. It's another very, very tough schedule for South Carolina. They had one of the toughest in the country last year. They do again in 2020, and that schedule could be enough to do him in. If Will Muschamp comes in there and has another 4-8 season, and in my opinion really just doesn't get to a bowl game, he could be out. Can't help the schedule, guys. It's the way it is. Your in-state rival is Clemson. You play in the SEC. Stuff like that's going to happen. And Will Muschamp, unfortunately, is getting the short end of that stick. And then finally, on our list, once again, not in any particular order, we have Jim Harbaugh, who is 47-18 in 5 years at Michigan. That includes 3 10-win seasons. So when you look at this record and you hear that 3 10-win seasons in 5 years, you say, how could a guy like this be on the hot seat? Does he deserve to be on the hot seat? Because I can tell you 47-18 at just about any other school in the country would be remarkable. They'd be thrilled. He's averaging nearly a 10-win season every year. The problem with Jim Harbaugh, as we all know, is he's unable to win the big games. He is 1-4 in bowl games. The only bowl victory he has was in his first year in 2015 when they annihilated Florida. They lost to Florida in the Peach Bowl a few years ago. They lost to Florida State in the Orange Bowl a few years ago. And an even bigger mark here is he is 0-5 against Ohio State, the only Michigan coach in history to go 0-5 against the Buckeyes. And as we all know, for Michigan and Ohio State both, you have to win the game. You have to win that game. And Harbaugh has failed to do it. And he's failed to do it in years where had they done it, they would have gone to the Big Ten championship and more than likely would have made the college football playoff. So 47-18, but he just can't figure out how to win the big ones. My question is, sure, put him on the hot seat. Michigan, who are you going to go get? Who are you going to go get that can consistently have you in contention for a Big Ten title berth, can consistently have you in contention for the college football playoff? Harbaugh is doing that. He just can't figure out to get over the hump. But if you get rid of him, you're going to be starting all over again. And you might not have somebody that can consistently have you in that position. Eventually, you'll break through. Don't know if it's going to be 2020, 21, 22, who knows? Harbaugh's on the hot seat for some. I don't think he should be up here, but we certainly had to address him. And then finally, we mentioned there were 9 coaches. We were only talking about 6. The 3 others that people had on their list Or Manny Diaz at Miami. Ridiculous. Take him off. He's been at Miami for 1 year. Like USC, like Michigan, maybe like Nebraska, Miami has very high standards, and Diaz did not meet those in year 1, going just 6-7. But he should not be on the hot seat. Maybe if he has another poor performance in year 2, I get it. But he brings in D'Eriq King, the transfer quarterback from Houston. That could be enough to give Miami a huge boost. And if Miami gets an 8-win season, well, that's nothing to get thrilled about. It's better than 6-7. They'll definitely go to a better bowl destination, and Manny Diaz can continue building his Hurricane squad. So take him off the hot seat. He's a guy that understands the U. He's a guy that wants to be at the U. I think he's going to get there in time. Another coach they had, Tom Herman at Texas. 3 years he's been in Austin. 25-15 overall record. 7-6, 10-4, 8-5. After their win over Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, they proclaimed they were back. And 2019 proved that that was certainly not the case. They were disappointing there, but what Tom Herman's got going for him is, unlike Jim Harbaugh, he can win in the postseason. Herman is 3-0 in bowl games, including that Sugar Bowl victory over Georgia and a blowout victory over a top 15 Utah team in the Alamo Bowl this past season. Once again, he's a guy that wants to be at Texas. He loves Texas. He's winning in the postseason. He's gotten Texas back to really relevancy and respectability across the nation, and in time, he will have them there. So don't have him on the hot seat too much yet. And then finally, Gus Malzahn at Auburn. He's the guy that you're going to hear on the hot seat every single year. 62-31 in 7 years at Auburn, but only 2 double-digit win seasons. That's where people are getting frustrated. It's because Auburn is not every single year being in the SEC championship. Guess what? You can't do that in the SEC West. The only person that's done that is Nick Saban at Alabama. Malzahn's also 2-5 in bowl games. But what Malzahn is doing that not many people have been able to do is he has beaten Nick Saban. He's beaten him multiple times. He has made the SEC championship game multiple times. So every year Malzahn's on the hot seat, and every year he gets himself off of it. Auburn inked him to a huge, big contract just a few years ago. Don't think they have any intentions of getting rid of him soon, especially not after all the young guns that he's bringing in and after a fairly solid season they had in 2019 with a true freshman quarterback. So those were the other 3 that we didn't have up here that people thought should be on the hot seat, and I really don't think they are. But these guys certainly are, and you need to be on the lookout for them going into 2020 because they're all going to be fighting for their lives over the course of this college football season. So guys, thank you so much for watching us here at The Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Make sure to continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and check out everything we have for you down in the description below. Tons of extra college football news and content from us that you do not want to miss. So once again, we want to thank you so much for everything, and we will see you next time right here on The Gridiron Expert.